for these people to pit you against you, to make you hate you, to make you wear this nonsense and you want some more stress. You're together!
And you know what? It was in the buses, it was the workers in the buses who got organised to close down the front doors. In the tube, it was R&T workers who got organised to protect their workers. And this is a lesson for us. How do we smash racism? And we would say, to smash racism, we need to smash capitalism. And it is us organised workers, young people, students together who can smash the system and fight for socialism. Thank you very much.
My name is Matt. I'm proud to be from Hull. I'm proud that I'm a trade unionist and a socialist. I'm proud to be an anti-racist campaigner, and I'm proud to be a nurse as well. I'm proud to say I'm a member of the Socialist Party. I believe that socialism and solidarity is the answer to our problems. A system that gives everyone a house, everyone a job, everyone food in their bellies, money in their pocket, and doesn't leave those at the bottom scrapping for the scraps that the bosses give us.
Fred Hampton, leader of the Black Panther Party, he said, we're going to fight racism, not with racism, but we're going to fight it with solidarity. We're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism. We must organise solidarity and reconcile.
There's a 15% pay rise for NHS.
When we were in our houses, for those that delivered our posts and our parcels for us, and for those that fed our nation, delivering millions and millions of that if we organise and we join our trade unions, the members can organise and coordinate the fight back and push the trade unions so that they start acting towards our benefit of the trade unions fight for us. Continue to carry on fighting for socialism, a better society for all of us, for a better society that's equally democratically run under workers' control and management. And that's why I'm a socialist and a member of a Socialist Party.
Thank you to the organisers for letting me speak. I bring solidarity from Homerton Hospital Unison branch. We say we can win 15% now. We can win NHS pay and conditions for all NHS workers. We can win renationalisation of the NHS.
What we're demanding is full funding for the universities, expand and open up the universities for every working class student who wants to attend. Why can it only be for students who go to Harrow and Eton that they get the quality of education the kids at Oxbridge get? We want that quality of education. It's possible. You can win that. So we demand an expansion of the universities, but also, while we're at it, scrap tuition fees, cancel student debt, and privatisation of the universities.
Hello, I'm Julia. I'm here with the Young Socialists Yorkshire. Today we've organised a National Day of Action to put pressure on the TUC to join the fight for better jobs and training schemes for young workers.
We demand a mass programme of public works improving the city's infrastructure and employing thousands of workers.
Hi, I'm a London bus driver. I'm also a Unite rep from Woolworth Bus Depot. So let's get the ballot papers out there voting yes for industrial action and get management to back down.
Many NHS workers in Northern Ireland are paid up to £5,000 less than their equivalents elsewhere in the UK, and that has resulted in a chronic staff crisis. And what we need to see now is action to close the gap, and the workers here are out today. There's determination, and they'll be out again and again over the next 6 months until we achieve what we need, which is full pay equality and an end to the staffing crisis. Thank you.
There's a need for us to make our demands more concrete. Yes. My proposal be say any political office holder, from councillor to the president, make them put them on the minimum wage. Yes. Make them place them on the minimum wage.
The responsibility for those murders is not only with those people, it's not only with the governors of the cities, it's not only with the governors of the state. It goes right up to the very top with Buhari himself. He claims to be the president representing the people. And if he stays there in office after witnessing brutality on his watch, he should resign right now. That wealth needs to be taken from the rich and distributed on a fair and equitable basis. Every Nigerian man, woman and child has a right to a decent standard of living. Standard of living, we need socialism, we need public ownership, we need democracy. That's how we build that future.
Socialism 2020 event, an extended weekend of discussion and debate with 38 workshops taking place. I'm Helen Patterson, I'm the London Regional Secretary of the Socialist Party, and I'm very excited to be chairing tonight's rally. This rally is being streamed on Facebook, Insta, Twitter and YouTube, and that means you can help spread the ideas of socialism being discussed here tonight. You can do that by liking and sharing the rally on social media, and please take a minute to do that now. And why not send a message to workmates, trade union activists, friends and family, and tell them to tune in to hear about how a fight back can be built against the rotten capitalist system. This is a socialism weekend like no other. We are meeting during unprecedented political, economic and health crises, and for the first time ever, Socialism 2020 is an entirely online event. Usually the rally would look something like this: a packed hall decorated with flags and banners, posters lining the walls, the lights would be dimming and we would be settling down together for the rally to start. Well, tonight, sadly, we can't all be together, but that's okay, because the most important part of this rally is the political ideas that we've come here together to discuss. And on that front, we have not scrimped. We have a jam-packed lineup for you tonight, so sit back, listen and enjoy. COVID in the campuses has been a big topic of discussion in recent weeks, so it's extremely appropriate that our first speaker is going to be Bea Gardner, a socialist students activist. She's here to talk to us about the crisis on the university campuses, the struggles of students and staff for an education system which is safe, affordable and works for all. Here is Bea.
Across education, in schools, colleges and universities, a reckless return strategy has been forced by this callous Tory government. Millions of pupils and students returned to in-person classes in September without the resources and measures in place for that to be safe, putting the safety of staff, students and the community at risk. But education outbreaks weren't inevitable. We in Socialist Students have called for joint staff and student committees in universities and colleges to oversee the COVID plans. We could have democratically and collectively determined the best way of protecting health while guaranteeing quality education, using resources of institutions to meet staff and student need, and we still can. With adequate resources, including a functioning test, trace and isolate system, it could have been entirely possible to have safe in-person teaching and other in-person activities. But instead, we got a catalogue of government failings. We got educational managers unwilling to cough up the cash to provide what was needed, or even to consult properly with the trade unions. We now know that the government's own advisors recommended that without these additional measures, university students shouldn't have returned back to halls. Not because of student parties. We have to counter those attempts to defer blame onto students, rather because when students are living in very close, overcrowded proximity with each other, the virus had the potential to spread very rapidly. And it is an absolute scandal that despite knowing that these outbreaks were extremely likely and knowing they didn't have adequate provision to support students quarantining, university management flung open the doors and encouraged students in. It was driven by pure desperation to get their hands on tuition and accommodation fees. Not, by the way, the outrageous claim made by Vice-Chancellors that their actions have been driven by concern for student mental health. Anyone can see that the forced halls lockdowns, leaving students in prison-like conditions, is terrible for mental health. And after a decade of austerity and cuts, reducing mental health provision to its bare bones, how dare they say that this is about student well-being? So university bosses, backed by the government, have ploughed ahead with these reckless return plans despite the warnings. But they did this because of more than self-interest. They did this because their funding system is in crisis and they have no way out. It is true that university vice-chancellors are on obscene salaries, an average of $350,000 a year. But the way they run universities is not only for personal gain. They run our education under the logic of a funding system based on maximising income while driving costs down, a business model, in other words. But such a model has its limits. University finances were already under strain before COVID. To put it simply, they could not squeeze any more from the overworked, underpaid and precariously employed workforce without provoking staff struggle. And that is why we saw 22 days of strike action in the winter and spring by the UCU, with casual workers and many PhD students at the forefront of that struggle, fighting for basic rights, including sick pay. But neither could university bosses pack any more students onto courses. Last year, we saw overflowing lecture theatres and oversubscribed demand for campus resources, all features which have hampered their ability to cope with the pandemic. And they couldn't possibly raise accommodation fees either beyond what they were. The average student loan doesn't cover accommodation. So university funding was already under enormous strain. The coronavirus has merely escalated and accelerated this process, and it's shown where they've been papering over the cracks. Terrified that students would fall during COVID and that the whole system would collapse. Because of that, university management have been over the summer, they preemptively cut costs, including making redundancies, cutting pay and refusing to invest in what was needed for campuses to be safe, all the while lying to students, telling them that it would be business as normal. The whole time, the government was determined and remains determined not to provide a bailout to universities, instead acting like cheerleaders for the reopening plans. They know that if they bailed out universities, then workers in other sectors would want the same too. And they weren't willing to give it, and they're still not. And a bailout of universities would also reveal that the resources do exist to invest in education, for it to be publicly funded and therefore also free. And they're desperate to avoid the pressure that would bring. But the government is under pressure regardless. Their role in the higher education crisis is exposing a new generation of students to the failure of this market model, and those students are pointing the blame at the Tories and their fee system. And as a result, the stirrings of new student struggle are emerging. Socialist students have participated in protests around the UK. We've seen rent strikes in Glasgow, in Manchester, Bristol and elsewhere. And it isn't only undergraduate students that are fighting, many postgraduates and other students are fighting back as well. But beyond education, a new generation is experiencing firsthand the limitations and failures of the capitalist system that offers no hope for a decent future. And there is an enormous potential for mass protest and struggle to erupt. This summer, we saw the explosion on the streets of young people in response to the Black Lives Matter protests in the US. A-level students got a taste of victory, forcing a government U-turn over the scandalous A-level algorithm that reinforced class inequalities so blatantly. However, we do have a crisis of leadership and organisation which is currently holding young people and students back. Where is the National Union of Students? 10 years after the mass protests over the trebling of tuition fees, how is the NUS organising the fight back of students today? If you are a student, join Socialist Students to help us build the democratic and fighting student organisations that our movement needs. Organisations which link localised struggles as part of a national campaign for free, safe and quality education. Help us take the fight to the education managers, big business and the government. And help us campaign for rents to be capped at a quarter of the average maintenance loan and the scrapping of student debt. As I conclude my comments, I want to give solidarity to all of those branches of the University and Colleges Union that are in dispute over unsafe work and attack to our jobs and conditions. By fighting back, you are giving confidence not only to other branches of the UCU, but giving a fighting lead to all of us. The representatives of capitalism want us to pay for the COVID crisis with our lives and livelihoods. They've shown that they cannot maintain their system while at the same time providing us with the things we need, the basic things we need, including jobs, homes, and education. Therefore, whether you're inside or outside of education, we are part of the same struggle. The unity of staff, students, trade unionists, and campaigners is vital in this next period. Together, we can stand as a mighty force, able to win vital and necessary concessions for our class. But alongside this, in the course of our fight back, now more than ever, we need to raise the banner of socialism for an alternative to the rotten exploitation, division, and oppression that the capitalist system offers us in favour of the democratic running of society in our collective interests. Thanks, and solidarity with you all.
Thank you, Bea. We covered the crisis on the university campuses in a recent episode of our podcast called Socialism. There are about 100 past episodes available, covering everything from international events, protest movements, theory and more. You can find Socialism the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It has not been a quiet year. On top of the pandemic, there have been huge political events, such as the Black Lives Matter movement. There have been campaigns for safety at work, strikes, workers fighting for decent PPE, and in between the lockdown, the struggles like that of the NHS workers fighting for the pay rise they deserve. Socialist Party members took part in all these struggles, following social distancing and safety measures. We supported these movements with our placards, our posters, leaflets with a programme to fight and win, but all of that costs money. And that is why now I'm handing over to Isai Priya, a member of the Socialist Party's National Committee, for the first part of tonight's financial appeal. Isai.
Thank you, Helen. And like Helen said, this year was a very difficult year for ordinary people, young people, and the working class. We were extra careful. We stayed safe during the lockdown phases, to protect ourselves and all those around us. Some of us have lost our jobs. Some members have sadly lost their family and loved ones. And the pandemic had a massive effect on our mental health. And it was all very hard. And under capitalism, it's always the working class that's made to pay for a crisis that we never caused. The Socialist Party is based and deeply rooted in the working class. And as a party, we found this year challenging. We prioritise the health and well-being of our members, but we haven't been silenced. We continue to produce our weekly paper, The Socialist, our monthly magazine, Socialism Today, our frequent podcast. We produced a young worker charter and a worker charter to arm the workers and young people with a programme to defend their health and safety and improve their pay and working condition. Now, the recent events that have taken place show the role that we play in society. Our influence in communities, trade union, and the wider labour movement is far more reaching than our membership alone. And we are confident that we got the ideas. But for our ideas to be able to change lives, to win rights, and to improve the living condition, we need the money. And it is in our tradition to set a target for socialism, for the many tasks that's in front of us. But this year we hesitated due to the difficulties facing the working class. But we, in the Socialist Party, also have unshakable confidence in the working class, and the party is and will continue to be built in the huge sacrifice of our members, both financially and through their time. We do not have any rich or big business backers, and we're happy about that because of the political independence it gives us. All the money that we have is through our membership, supporters, and wider labour movement. So this year, we are setting a target of £25,000. Now, this is a huge sum that we're trying to reach. Now, where is this money going to be used? Socialist Party members in our branches nationally have been out on stalls and have been taking part in protests and demonstrations locally, being safe, maintaining social distancing, wearing masks and all the adequate PPE. And we've also taken part in workers taking action over their health and safety, young people protesting against racism, health workers demanding a 15% pay rise, we've taken part to stop eviction and many more. And we also have taken part in solidarity events against the brutal police violence in Nigeria. We defended the rights of women to choose or to have or not to have children in Poland, and many other struggles that we have been involved in. Now we need the money to continue to produce our materials. Our placards this year have been able to get national coverage, and the slogans and the demands in them are the ideas to take the struggle forward. Now, we also have bravely taken our branch meeting, discussion, and organized a fight back through the digital world. And even though I still prefer a real-life meeting, we will all agree that the virtual meetings and online world has advantages. I mean, look at what we're doing today. This rally is being streamed in several social media forums, but we had to do major adapting and to spend money buying the equipment. We also helped the CWI, the international that the Socialist Party is affiliated to buy the technical equipment required. This year, we also have taken on one new full-time organizer for the Socialist Party in our national centre, and one organizer in West Midlands, as well as an organizer in London. Now, these will help towards building a fight back to get rid of this rotten, exploitative, discriminatory, profit-driven capitalist system. But we are still underfunded and understaffed in our industrial and organizational department. Now, every single amount that we raise today will be used to build a movement capable of change, to fight for a real working class representation for a mass workers' party. Now, there are now going to be information on your screen on how you can donate. You can donate either by going to socialistparty.org.uk/donate S20, or you can go to paypal.me/donate S20, or you can make pledges by texting your name, postcode, and your amount to 079 580 32071 and let us know when you can pay the pledge by. Now keep them coming in, and I will come back later with the donation that we have received. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll be hearing from Isai later. That's to give you a chance now to make a donation. Large or small, all donations are extremely important to our work. The details, as we said, are being shared in the chat wherever you're tuning in. Now, though, we turn to the US. Following an extremely polarising election, Trump is out, but sadly Trumpism is not over. Biden ran only as an anti-Trump candidate and will not answer the vital questions facing working class and young people of tackling poverty, inequality, oppression, or the fight for socialism. Howie Hawkins was the Green Party presidential candidate in the recent elections. He received over 370,000 votes, and tonight we have a message from him. Over to Howie Hawkins.
Okay, well, hello, Socialism 2020. It's nice to speak to you. Just briefly, what happened in our election is this was a referendum on Donald Trump. We tried to raise a progressive alternative, put forward real solutions to problems like climate. We've been advocating the Green New Deal, the inequality crisis, where working class life expectancies are in decline in the United States. So we had an economic bill of rights, including a job guarantee, guaranteed income above poverty, Medicare for all. And then, you know, our bulletin, the atomic scientist, has their doomsday clock the closest it's ever been to midnight. We're in a new nuclear arms race. We're deploying new strategic and tactical nuclear weapons. That was not discussed. I mean, we had peace policies, cut the military budget, pledge no first use, and then try to get more countries behind this new treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. None of this was discussed because this was a referendum on Trump. And even our socialist or radical intelligentsia were saying, don't vote for the Green Party, vote for Biden everywhere, because there was this overblown fear of a coup. I'm former military. I talked to some of my military friends in the Marine Corps, my American Legion post. Some of them had ties to Secret Service. There was no coup in the works, but that was a scare tactic. So, you know, our vote went down. We're approaching 400,000. They're still counting votes. But, you know, it wasn't just the independent left that our campaign represented. It was the progressive left in the Democratic Party. Once The establishment Democrats closed ranks to defeat Bernie Sanders. All the progressives lined up behind Biden, made no demands on him, no policy demands. So the campaign was not about issues. It was about Donald Trump. Trump would tweet, the media would respond, the Democrats would respond. Donald Trump's been setting the agenda for 5 years. And then you look at the results, the Democrats got their butts kicked. We did too, but they got their butts kicked down ballot because they offered no real program for working people. And you look at the exit polls, people voted for Trump, their top issue was the economy. So the tasks, I think, for the socialist, working class people, the independent left in this country are, we need a mass party of the people. We need to go back to the grassroots, organize local chapters, elect lots of people to local office. We can do that. We have, you know, the Green Party's elected over 1,200 over the years. We have over 100 in office now. That should be expanded in the thousands. And on that foundation to state legislatures and in the House, because the Green Party or any independent left is going to be subject to the larger dynamic of a presidential race until they have an organized base. There's actually going out and talking to, you know, Trump working class voters, as well as the people that don't vote, disproportionately working class people of color and youth, and have a real movement and a real, you know, power base in the political system, build it from the bottom up. I think that's where we got to go. The good news from our elections this year is that we did elect Greens to local office. I think the count's up to 24, mayors, city council members. And the other good news is that our campaign was a big hit with Generation Z. I mean, we're on TikTok and I haven't even seen this stuff, but they would take our campaign materials, remix it, and hundreds of thousands, and even in some cases, a couple of million people viewed it. And we're getting lots of messages from those young people saying, keep going, which is exactly what we plan to do. But I think the main thing is we need a mass party, you know, that's organized at the grassroots. Right now, we have movements that mobilize around single issues. The Green Party itself is really a federation of ballot lines where we have over 250,000 people registered with the state in the Green Party, but most of those people are not hooked into the ongoing locals that the Green Party does have or their election and issue campaigns. So we need a real organization, not just you're not gonna move the working class to independent politics and socialism with lectures from the podium, whether it's Bernie Sanders or me or anybody else. You gotta do it at the grassroots level, personally. You know, just like you don't organize a union by, you know, handing out a leaflet and leaving it at that. You gotta talk to people and organize them. So I think that's our task. We gotta be organizers.
Has exposed the inadequacy of capitalism and its political representatives to millions worldwide at a brutal rate. But in the trade unions, we know that just because something is exposed as being wrong, it doesn't mean it will stop happening. Our experience in the trade unions is that you have to fight to put it right. Look at the Haringey carers that had to both strike and take legal action against their employers to win legal pay rates. The government of Eton-educated political columnists has mishandled the COVID response, resulting in the deaths of nearly 55,000 people. They've prioritised handling the news about COVID rather than the crisis COVID has created. They've prioritised their ideology that profiteering private business is the best way to beat COVID despite all the evidence. £11 billion handed to private companies to provide equipment to fight COVID, some of which is never used because it was inadequate, and £3 billion of which is still unaccounted for. £130 million on private consultants, including £670,000 on PR consultants, not medical consultants, but PR consultants in the vaccine task force, and a private sector head of Test, Track and Trace whose previous experience as the head of TalkTalk was to allow thousands of customers' private details to be stolen, but yet can't trace 50% of COVID contacts. And who is leading the attack on behalf of workers, frontline workers who have lost their lives in the NHS, on the buses, providing essential services, and the thousands in care homes who definitely have not had a wall of protection around them against COVID? You'd be forgiven for thinking Marcus Rashford was the only attacker forcing the government into 2 U-turns on meals for millions of children living in poverty. Just imagine if the most powerful trade unions were led by socialists this year. We would have not have closed down for the first few months of the pandemic, or we would have put together instead a trade union national action plan for the production of PPE under democratic workers' control. Firstly, renationalising companies like NHS Logistics to determine demand, regulate production and quality, and ensure distribution. We'd have not just posed this as a serious alternative, but would have organised trade union members in the NHS and those private companies to demand emergency powers are used to bring this about. A socialist leader of Unison, the largest trade union, would have demanded an end to the private care catastrophe by calling for the provision and staffing of care homes to be brought into public sector under democratic workers' control, of joint local authority and health boards to end the cross-contamination from hospital to care home, the cross-contamination from the use of agency staff, and the end of the chronic staffing shortages, even recruiting some of the furloughed workers on trade union rates of pay into the sector. Again, this would have not just been an empty call, but a mobilisation of workers in the sector, patients and relatives demanding safety first. A socialist leadership of the major trade unions would demand testing and tracking was put into the hands of local joint health and local authority boards, democratically accountable, that recruit an army of trained trackers in the best tracking techniques to track 100% of those in contact with infected people. A socialist leadership of the main trade unions would have demanded 100% pay for all furloughed workers and all that have been asked to isolate, and not stood with Tories for payments that undermine their livelihoods. We could have mobilised 6 million workers in the ranks of the TUC and recruited more around this demand alone. A socialist leadership of the education unions would have demanded emergency funding for schools to deliver a mix of online and in-class education on the basis of safety first and access for all the resources needed to do that, including free access to the internet and IT equipment. A socialist leadership in the health unions would have been at the forefront of a claim for 15% pay rise for all NHS staff, who've put in more than 15% of unpaid hours into making sure during this COVID times that during the COVID crisis to save lives. And now the Tories plan to divide public sector workers from those in the private sector with a public sector pay freeze. We know in the trade unions that inaction only encourages further attacks. That's why a socialist leader of Britain's largest trade union, Unison, would be calling for an emergency NEC meeting of the union to draw up an action plan to put all of the public sector trade unions together and demand that we won't pay for the COVID crisis in the following years. Over the last few years, our pay is now 20% lower in real terms than what it was in 2009. We could make official the NSSN's call for a day of action on the 5th of December of all public sector workers. And the GMB have just announced they will organise national strike action to fight British Gas, threatening to sack and rehire staff in that company on worse pay terms and conditions. Unison has significant membership. We should be coordinating with them so that all workers in that industry take action against the cuts to their pay terms and conditions. And public sector jobs, especially in local councils, are in the firing line too. A socialist leader of Unison would want to bring together all those facing cuts into a national strategy to fight back, oppose all the cuts councillors, not a penny of union members' money to Labour councillors making cuts. And let's look again at political representation. Shouldn't we be demanding now discussion and debate in our unions about how best to represent workers' political interests? Keir Starmer is desperate to prove that he is a safe pair of hands for British capitalism by backing every Tory measure to solve this crisis. That's why he is prepared to roll back and humiliate the memory of Corbyn's 4 years of leadership of the Labour Party. I believe a socialist trade union leader would campaign for a new party to represent workers, starting by calling for a conference of trade unionists to discuss how best to achieve this. This year, I am standing for Unison General Secretary in the election that closes next Friday. Think what difference electing a Socialist General Secretary could make for the lives of millions of workers with a programme to transform our unions. I want to thank those Unison members that are listening in to this meeting who have campaigned for support for me. But it's not just for me. They've campaigned to build a body of ideas in our trade union movement that could build and end the misery of capitalism. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Hugo. There are currently elections taking place in Unison, so members can have a say in their leadership. Our next speaker is Peter Taff, who is the Socialist Party's political secretary. Over decades, Peter has defended the ideas of socialism and Trotskyism against hostile and also pro-capitalist voices. He's played an immense role in analysing world events, putting forward what is needed. At every turn, he has defended the need to fight for socialism and helped keep the banner of socialism alive. Today, capitalism is in crisis. Around the world, people are questioning the economic system and joining the fight for socialism. Here is a message from Peter that was filmed on Wednesday of this week about how the fight for socialism is vital to offer workers around the world a lead. Peter Taff.
Well, comrades, brothers and sisters, I'd like to welcome you all in Britain and worldwide to what promises to be a tremendous event that is socialism. And it really represents a landmark in the struggles of a certain section of working people to arm each one of you and us with an analysis of what is happening in this trying time in Britain and internationally. I've been active in the labour movement for more years than I care to remember, of decades, but never have I experienced, like many of you of the older generation, a crisis like this, which is multifaceted, which has had a devastating effect on the health of millions of workers of a pandemic. Now there's a certain relief promised in relation to the development of a vaccine, but the other side of this is already we have evidence that the rich are trying to gain the benefits of this and to line their own pockets, certainly at the expense of ordinary working people in Britain and worldwide. It represents really what is organic to capitalism, and that is the inevitable looting of the state of the resources of you and I that have been built up over a long period. They cannot help that. On a TV programme here last night, when one of these people was challenged why she was making millions out of the pandemic and out of this vaccine, she objected, well, we're in a partnership with big business, with the state. And actually, what that reveals is the character of the economic situation that exists now, which is a barrier to us exploiting all the marvellous developments of science and technique which we are responsible for. That is the working class and the labour movement itself. All the manic tendencies of capitalism have come to the fore in this pandemic. The Guardian, for instance, this very day, that's the British Guardian, has carried the report of where a leading opponent of Trump in the US actually has characterised Trump as a new George III, who, as we know, was opposed to the idea of the independence of America and actually has sacked this individual or threatened to sack him. The Johnson regime in Britain is not much worse, is not much better rather, than the regime of Trump in America. It's more like, if you like, a combination of Nero in ancient Rome and Rasputin, part of the court camarilla, that betoken that was around the Tsar, that was an indication of the coming revolution in Russia itself. The government has been transformed in the last couple of weeks before our eyes into a kind of chumocracy. That's the chums of Boris Johnson who are cashing in of jobs for the boys and the girls, while the masses are at the gates of number 10 Downing Street acting, demanding measures that will uplift and solve the problems of working people. This is against the background of massive discontent in these months and a year of the pandemic. There are dire and worsening conditions in Britain. George Monbiot, a left commentator on events in Britain, has actually said, before we offer solutions, we have to recognise that the US political system may not be fixable. The system is constitutionally padlocked. What is that but an expression of the deep crisis of world capitalism, of US capitalism itself? The Supreme Court is in the power of money. This may tie the hands, he says, of Biden in relation to offering a new deal to the American working class. Of course, we and our co-thinkers in America will be doing everything in our power to change that situation and force them, through the power of the labour movement, to change the position and act in the interests of working people. However, the depth and character of this organic, deep crisis of capitalism, because that's what it is, compels mass action, or the mass of the working class will be forced significantly into the gutter. The system only briefly, barely surviving on the mountain of debt that is being built up. The future prospects for this system, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. You only have to open the Financial Times today with a headline: young workers and students suffer most from COVID economic fallout. Of an item on the teachers in Britain, where teachers hand out food as well as feeding minds. That's in the eye. That's just one little reflection of the depths of the crisis of British capitalism, and that doesn't take into account the world crisis of capitalism that we will be dealing with in this socialism event. The future prospects for this system, there is no light at the end of a very dark tunnel. This is really a reflection of the stagnation, at best, of world capitalism. There are no real reserves upon which it can call. It's stagnation. It means that, in effect, they will confront protests by working people at the conditions and revolutionary explosions. This is like, as one commentator said, the bourgeois, the capitalists, in the measures that they're undertaking, are playing with fire in a wooden house. That's the reality of world capitalism today. The political contortions of the different capitalist governments reflects this. Obviously, in the case of Trump himself, he actually flirted with the idea of a coup against the results of the American election. But then the opposition was too visible, too open, and he appears for the time being to have retreated, although he's taking his time to hand over to the legitimate government of Biden. And by the way, that has stoked up enormous anger of the masses. It's not yet played out in America. And this is against the background, let us remember, in a period when it can get worse than the current situation. where mass unemployment is organic, is rooted in the system now. For instance, in Britain there's been a 400% increase of those on the minimum wage. So some have jobs, some don't have jobs. 2 million who are on the minimum wage, who are below the minimum wage. The new poor going to the food banks, which now includes, as we've seen, sections of the middle class. There's the looting of the state by, as I've mentioned, by the new capitalists who are trying to cash in on the new developments that could combat the pandemic itself. It's same in relation to the NHS. Even at this time, the NHS, by the so-called providers, and that's code for those private interests who are trying to cash in on the NHS at our expense. Even the NHS providers, so-called, are trying to make a fortune out of leeching on the NHS itself. We hoped, I'm sure you did as well, that the development of this vaccine would offer a certain relief. It can offer a certain relief. We welcome the development of the vaccines, but it must above all be free to the mass of the working class. We shouldn't have any divisions between working people, young and old, poor and not so poor. It should be a universal service, because we have developed this vaccine, that's you and me and the working class, have developed through the genius of the working class and the resources that have been built up by the NHS in many examples. These developments and the growing class anger will blow away the massive accumulated discontent that exists at the moment and raise the possibility of the need for struggle, because we will not get what we want on the basis of merely asking for it from the government or from our leaders for that matter. But now there is a semi-permanent right-wing populist movement in the US that can make a comeback if the labour movement does not offer an alternative. There's a colossal mountain of problems which could overwhelm and engulf working people and society. Struggle is inevitable, and mass resistance, whether we demand it or not, is inevitable amongst working people here, in America, in Europe and worldwide. You only have to open a newspaper and see from Marseille to Germany, there is a battle taking place now where the working class are expressing their opposition to the system and their failure to solve the problems that they could confront. In other words, we face the outline of a mass resistance to the attempt to impose the costs of this on the shoulders of the working class. We have to resist, but we have to go further than that. We have to raise the necessity for an alternative economic and social system. That's what this event is about, of socialism, of a planned economy that can begin to solve the problems of working people. All the elements are there to bring together the resources in the form of the workplace and also of the enormous ingenuity of the British working class and the working class worldwide, but only if we abolish this dysfunctional system. You cannot proceed to progress on the basis of the perpetuation of the old system that has failed the working class, that has failed the middle class, that has failed the people of Britain, the people of Europe and of the world. You only have to examine the incredible antics of Johnson, the arrogance of a public schoolboy and his fellow co-thinkers. He's got no answer to the problems that face the working class at the moment. And moreover, he seems to be out of control by the class that he represents, that is the capitalist class itself. We are entering, comrades, an explosive period in which the faults of capitalism can be laid even more bare to the mass of the working class. That's why there's an interest in this event now. We must go further and make an appeal to every worker, to every young person in particular with their lives before them, that we offer a programme, a policy, a perspective for the working class and the labour movement itself. This is an explosive period in which capitalism can reveal its faults very quickly. The economic situation which we've touched on, the incredible corruption at the heart of all the governments of capitalism, the massive subsidies that they are giving to their own class and not to the working class, the looting of the state, because there is a massive looting taking place, as many commentators have pointed out, like George Monbiot, where there's a holding down of the wages of the working class, but there's a looting of the state with colossal subsidies to big business. I could spend all my time given the figures, but they're easily accessible in the pages of the capitalist press. There is no lifeline on the horizon for capitalism. It will stagger from one crisis to another. One thing is certain: they intend that the mass of the population, the working class, will pay for this crisis. Look at the rising cost of putting workers on furlough. Look at the tragedy of youth unemployment. For one young worker to be out of a job is criminal. I saw the 1980s. I've seen many crises in Britain when the youth suffered. This is one of the worst, both in its potential and its effects. Every family in Britain, my family, has been affected, and we're not prepared to put up with it. Look at the situation of homelessness now, where millions are on the verge of being thrown out of their houses because they can't pay the rent. The government has come forward with no programme. We say organise a systematic homelessness movement and resist being evicted from your home. That's a basic right of a human being. Look at the position in the local councils now. We have a tremendous record, second to none, in relation to the idea that the councils should be platforms for struggle, not to cosy up to big business and the government. That's why we conducted the tremendous struggle in Liverpool in relation to the council there that resisted the attacks of Thatcher. And remember, this was the party that defeated Thatcher not once, but twice, that reduced the Iron Lady to iron filings with the massive movement of the working class. And as a result, we grew to at least 8,000 members, in which we had a semi-mass influence. Those days are as nothing compared to what stands before you in this explosive period that is opening up. There's no lifeline for capitalism on the horizon. The only certainty is the masses will be asked to pay with more pain, more suffering, and we are not prepared to put up with that. More homelessness. Look at the position of Croydon Council, which is really now going under because of its mountain of debt. Croydon should do what Liverpool did and defy the government, and then call for a coalition of councils to do the same throughout Britain. If you look at the way that Tusk is trying to organise, that's the trade union and socialist coalition, and that is linked to the shenanigans, because that's what they are, the shameful behaviour of the right within the Labour Party in the recent days, where, for instance, Jeremy Corbyn is at one day let back into the Labour Party, then is denied the Labour whip we have heard. It's a scandal the way Jeremy Corbyn has been treated. And remember, this is from Keir Starmer, who in a recent letter to the CBI, the Confederation of British Industry, said he wanted a new partnership with business, reminding them that as shadow Brexit secretary, he had pursued policies by implication backing a second referendum. And if you know, that was really a second referendum to go into the EU. Starmer is an unalloyed right-winger. His left phrases cover really the demand for a national government. And a national government is another name for a Tory government in disguise. Look at the national government of 1931. We are going to resist that. We have tried to convince some trade union leaders like Lenny McCluskey He's shown his real colours now, Starmer, in the last day, by first of all agreeing that Jeremy Corbyn should rejoin the Labour Party, and then because of the pressure of the right, it seems now, is saying no, he will not get the Labour whip. That's a form of exclusion from the Labour Party. If the Labour Party proceeds in this way, we've had meetings with Lenny McCluskey. We have a member of the leadership of the Unite speaking at this meeting here today, of Howard Beckett, who's part of the leadership of that movement. And we say quite clearly, either take a clear position in relation to the right within the Labour Party. There is no possibility of compromise with these people. There's no compromise with Margaret Hodge, a representative of the open right wing from the times when we were in Islington, Labour Party, myself and Linda Taft, me nominally, her much more actively. These people will not rest until they've driven every left winger out of the party. We say we're going to defeat you either by helping to transform, and that's not completely ruled out, although it seems very, very unlikely now in the light of what Starmer's done in the last couple of days, or more likely begin to lay the foundations by building Tusk of a new mass party of the working class. That's the only hope for working people. So, comrade chairman and comrades, prepare for the mass alternative. That's what this event here is about today. My faith in the British working class and the world working class is as undimmed as it was more than 50 years ago when we went into the regions of Liverpool and we won a base amongst the working class, when we shook the ruling class to its foundations, when we defeated the poll tax, and we did defeat the poll tax. Thatcher herself was removed from office as a result of that. When we built a powerful mass non-payment campaign. Why? Who's to say you can't do that again today? There's enough explosive social material in Britain. The time now is to seize the opportunities. Let's make this event here this weekend a great success in terms of attendance, but let's turn it into combatants and members of the Socialist Party, and in that way build the foundations of a new, exciting force in Britain that will change the lives, that will transform the lives of the working class, above all, of the youth who are looking for an alternative now. Why do I say that? Because we have the clarity of ideas. We tell the truth about capitalism and of those who are hanging on to the coattails of capitalism. We support all of those who are prepared to fight, but we say examine the programme upon which we need to fight. If we approach it in the right way, we will build a powerful organisation. Take no notice of the poisonous purveyors of poison, like Andrew Rawnsley in The Observer. Every article he writes is dripping in poison, either against us or against Jeremy Corbyn. Say it has as much effect as water on a hot stove. We base ourselves on the approval or otherwise of the working class. And when they hear our ideas, they actually embrace them. What kind of Labour leader is prepared to call himself a Sir? Sir Keir Starmer. That's enough as far as I am concerned. He's not a real Labour leader, and it's one of the things that we have a difference with some of those in Unite. We need to create a new force, a new party, a new leadership that's prepared to go to the end in fighting capitalism and creating a new planned economy. What is a socialism? It's the planned utilisation of all the resources of society, and in that way to transform the leadership, the position of the working class. We are going to see a certain lifting of the lockdown. Let's see that happens in the not too distant future. That will provide a period for us to work much more openly. We've achieved miracles. It's enormous. I'm enormously proud of the members of the Socialist Party, particularly the younger comrades who in the teeth of great difficulties have built a basis for a new socialist movement in Britain. Let's go to it now with power and with strength and with a conviction that we're going to win the British working class to our programme and the world working class and link up with them in a mighty movement internationally for world socialism, which is the only hope for humankind to get us out of this morass of crises, of pandemic and all the horrors of capitalism. So thank you very much, comrades.
In the past and today, Peter has played a really important role pulling together socialist forces around the world. And part of that has included defending the important ideas of Leon Trotsky. You can read more about Leon Trotsky's ideas in the CWI's latest publication, Leon Trotsky, a Revolutionary Whose Ideas Couldn't Be Killed, and it's £6 if you buy it before Monday. We will be putting in the chat details of how to get that publication wherever you're watching. You can also still donate to our Socialist Party appeal. You can either head to our website or you can text your name, postcode, the amount and when you're going to be able to pay your donation by to 079 580 32071. Our meetings and campaign work continued throughout the pandemic, just often in new and different ways. But we continued because in this pandemic, the working class has been thrown into battle against capitalist crisis. And as a result, socialism is growing in popularity. The Socialist Party has grown at the fastest rate in decades throughout this year and through the pandemic. Anti-racism activists, Corbyn supporters, trade unionists, students and others have joined this party and the fight against socialism. And if you agree, you should join us too. There's a Zoom meeting tomorrow for people who are interested in joining the Socialist Party. If you have a ticket to the workshops, then you'll have had an email which includes all of those details. If you're just listening into this rally, you can put a message in the chat function on any of the platforms that we're streaming to, and we'll get in touch with you about how to join. Alternatively, you can head to our website, socialistparty.org.uk/join. The Socialist Party is part of the Committee for a Workers' International, who are active in countries around the world. So if you're from a country outside of England and Wales, you can head to socialistworld.net to find out about our work in your country. We invited Jeremy Corbyn, given the current political attacks on him, to come and speak at this rally. He sent us a very friendly reply saying that he couldn't because of time constraints, and also said for us to keep up the good work but accept his apologies on this occasion. Our next speaker, though, was another late addition to the lineup who we're hoping we'll be able to have on. We're having some technical difficulties, but there are people just working on it right now. The trade unions represent 6 million workers in Britain, a force which, if it's properly mobilised, has the potential to defend jobs, services and safety. And we're very lucky to have Howard Beckett, who is one of the Unite's Assistant General Secretaries and on the Labour Party NEC, speaking us tonight in a personal capacity. And we think we're going to go over to Howard now.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you everybody in the Socialist Party for all that you do for workers on a daily and a weekly basis. And I particularly would like to start by thanking my good friend Robbie Williams, who is in himself a one-man picket line. There is not a dispute in any of our nations that you do not see Robbie attending, and I think it would be wrong of me not to thank him for all of the work that he does on behalf of trade union members. I want to talk today about the COVID crisis that obviously faces us, the desire in society for workers to pay for this crisis. And I want to talk also about the political vacuum that now exists when it is difficult to tell the difference between the narratives of the two main political parties. COVID, obviously, in the second wave, continues to shine a light on the inequalities of society. It is sad for all of us, but it is a reality that we must face, that after the first wave of COVID, we very quickly forgot that it was frontline workers who had paid for this crisis with their lives, and we went back to normal. As the collapse stopped on a Thursday night and people returned to work, It was forgotten how we needed to own the narrative and demand that society changed because of the light that COVID had shone on inequalities. And none of us need reminding that if you're from a poor background, or if you're black and ethnic minority, or if you're a frontline worker, you are more likely to have contracted COVID, and you are far more likely to have lost a loved one in this crisis. And sadly, as we come into the second wave, I am always reminded about a quote that was given to me by a United Executive member who works for Sainsbury's, told by Sainsbury's that her work was essential and that she was feeding the nation. And she responded by saying, well, how about giving me a sufficient wage so I can feed my family? And therein lies the truth of the inequalities of society and the government's handling of this crisis, the way that they have left sectors in desperate need of intervention and they have failed, the way that they have talked about business being viable in a moment of crisis, when, of course, what we need are viable sectors after crisis in order to rebuild our country. They have condemned sectors and they have condemned workers. And if we take Sainsbury's and the supermarkets as the example, since this pandemic began, they've received £1.9 billion in business tax relief. They have paid out £1.3 billion in dividends to their shareholders. And that's at a time when Sainsbury's, who have made enormous profits through this COVID crisis, forced workers into work, describing their work as essential, announces the closure of Argos, the closure of in-store counters, and the loss of 3,500 jobs. We have to demand and expect more. It's a sad reality that since the 2008 financial crash, the stock market has increased its wealth by 1.4 trillion. The richest 1,000 people in our country have increased their personal wealth by 588 billion. Yet workers have seen their wages in real terms go down by 433 billion. And that is predicted only to get worse. And this week we have had an announcement that 5.5 million public sector workers can expect a pay freeze. Again, workers told that they must pay for this crisis. And where is the voice of Labour? Where are our arguments that it is time to tackle the Tories and talk of nationalising those businesses that are essential and flag carrier businesses, that they should be nationalised before workers pay for the crisis with their terms and conditions? Where is the argument about a wealth tax? Where is the exposing of the monies, the millions that has been siphoned off through the NHS? Where is our voice about safety in the workplace being the priority? Where is the debate over zero COVID in order to save lives and have the chance of rebuilding our economy? Where is the debate over whether or not schools and universities should be shut until such time as there is mass testing available? Where are the demands over care homes? 1% of the population in care homes, but a third of the COVID deaths. And in a week where it was revealed that one man received £21 million for doing nothing more than introducing a supplier to the NHS for PPE, when thousands of people have died through COVID, where there has been an announcement of pay freeze for 5.5 million public sector workers. We have a Labour leadership determined to trounce Corbynism, determined to make a stamp that they are new leadership, and in doing so have created a civil war within the Labour Party that sees the attempt to exit Corbynism from the Labour Party, and in doing so exit socialism itself from the Labour Party. And we must condemn the Labour leadership for doing so. We must be clear that Jeremy Corbyn should never have had his membership suspended. We should be honest that the EHRC report predicted that people would want to talk about the scale of anti-Semitism within Labour in order to tackle the problem of anti-Semitism. But also, we should be clear that there are not 200,000 anti-Semites in Labour, and we should be clear that a leader who was made by the right-wing media to own every act of racism by any member of Labour deserved to have the right to defend his record and to defend his own reputation. He should never have been suspended. But whenever a legitimate NEC panel put together by the General Secretary of the Labour Party in receipt of advice from Glue, with a sitting council in attendance, made the decision that there would be no rule breach by Jeremy Corbyn and his membership should be reinstated. That NEC decision should have been upheld. In not doing so, there are issues of double jeopardy. It flies in the face of natural justice. It undermines the Labour Party rulebook. It undermines the entire dispute process, and it undermines the legitimacy of the NEC members who sat on that panel. Jeremy Corbyn's whip was only ever withdrawn from him because of the administration suspension of his membership. It should immediately have been returned to him as soon as his membership was reinstated, and not to do so undermines the very democratic fabrics of the Labour Party. And at this moment in time, obviously, we desperately need political opposition. It is difficult to see the decision over Jeremy Corbyn in isolation. It is very difficult to see it in isolation from the decision of the Labour Party to abstain. A bill that is designed to make lawful acts of murder, torture and rape, and a bill that is designed to legitimise the infiltration of our movement. A bill that will see the end of our demands for an inquiry in respect of blacklisting, in respect of Shrewsbury, in respect of Orgreaves. A bill that would render the Spy Cops inquiry that is currently occurring as completely and utterly inappropriate and unnecessary. And we abstained in respect of that bill. So it is very difficult to see the current position within Labour in isolation of previous decisions. But colleagues, I refuse to be pessimistic about where we are. If we cannot rely upon the leadership of Labour, we can certainly rely upon our own people and our own troops. In Unite alone, since this pandemic has started, we have had 12 walkouts in food factories as a result of safety at work issues. We have never repudiated any official or unofficial industrial action in over 10 years. Last week, we won a judicial review to ensure that picketing and the rights to picket are upheld during a pandemic. The police and government telling our members that it was safe to be inside a workplace, but not safe to picket outside of that workplace. Well, we challenged it and we were successful, and the right to picket has been upheld. We currently have strikes and picket lines in Uptown in North East and in Rolls-Royce in the North West. We have action threatened in Heathrow. And last week, the first ballot commenced in respect of British Airways. So it is time for us to reject a narrative that workers should pay for this crisis. It will not be the spids and speculators of the city who will rebuild this country coming out of the COVID crisis. We must be reminded that when people returned from the Second World War in 1946, they expected more from society. They were not frightened of a debt that was twice the percentage size as it is now. They built 1 million council houses. They demanded a social state, and they demanded that their children have the right to further education. And it is that spirit that we must now have coming out of this crisis. We must reject fire and rehire. We must reject layoff clauses. We must reject pay freezes. We must talk of nationalisation, and we must say very clearly that wealth taxes will pay for this crisis along with borrowing and investment, and that the debt can be parked as wartime debt, and that the next generation must not pay for it with insecure work or with the shackles of debt for years to come. We must be very clear. And in order to achieve that, comrades, we as a movement must be very clear that our right to withdraw Labour is exactly what we will do in an organised fashion coming out of this crisis if the narrative is not changed to say that wealth can pay for this crisis and not workers. If the narrative is not changed, then as a movement, we must talk very clearly about coordinated and cohesive and aggressive industrial action, because only workers can rebuild this country, and we must not go about rebuilding this country to have more of the past as our future. Thank you, comrades.
Thank you, Howard. We stand with all workers fighting for safety against job losses and attacks at this time. Our weekly newspaper, The Socialist, is sold outside and inside workplaces up and down the country. It's an essential tool for campaigners, socialists and trade unionists, and covers the struggle of our class alongside analysis, demands and tactics to fight and win. You can subscribe to our weekly paper and our monthly journal, Socialism Today, through our website. They are both available in paper and digital forms, either sent to your doorstep or directly to your device. Head to socialistparty.org.uk/subscribe to find out more. Now we're heading back to Isai, who's going to fill us in on how the financial appeal has gone so far this evening. Isai.
Thank you, Helen. And I just want to, before that, I just want to say, despite the many technical issues that we're having today, we will not be silenced. And we got an iron determination to get through our rally and to smash any obstacle or any further obstacle that might come in our way. But if you haven't listened to my previous appeal, then I don't need to give any more example than the concrete technical equipment that we need to buy to make sure that our ideas can reach you. And so if you haven't already done so, comrades, please make a pledge or make a donation. And I want to say a big thank you to all the donations and the pledges that we have received so far. And if you don't have your money now, then don't worry, it's okay. You can make a promise, an IOU, and then you can pay to us by Christmas. And many of the Socialist Party areas have approached their members beforehand for a pledge, and some have been donating through the course of the week leading up to this rally. And we have got a fantastic response. So I want to read out some, unfortunately I can't read out all, but I'm going to read out some of the donation that we received. So the first ones I'm going to read out is from Southwest region, which raised a total of £6,035. Now that donation includes 600 from Roger, who's a PCS member, 250 from Ian, who's a CWU member, 100 from Amy, who's a Unison member, but also a young socialist. We got 50 from a Matt, who's a new member, and 20 from Sam, who's a student. But we also got another donation from Barbara and Brian from the Eastern region of £1,000. We also received a big donation of £1,830 from just a dozen of Swansea and West Wales comrades, including £500 from Ken's redundancy payment, 500 from Carol and Dave's retirement payment. Linda and Alec has also made a further £500 donation, which is from Linda's retirement payment from last year. We got another branch in London this time that raised over £1,000, which is North London branch, which raised a total of £1,890. Now this sum includes 350 from Jack, who's a low-paid but works with homeless people. We also got £10 in that donation from Juliet and Ian, Juliet is a retail worker and Ian is a full-time organizer for the party. And during the course of the rally, I also got a message from Nick in the same branch saying that he is donating to help us with getting better equipment as well. So thank you, comrades. I got another London branch which has donated £2,000, which is a West London branch. And again, this amount includes 500 from a member who recently lost his job but is donating part of his redundancy payment. And we got £20 from a low-paid worker and £300 from a pensioner. Now, I just want to say at this point that it's not the amount that you're donating, but the portion of the income that you are donating. So, for example, a £10 from a student or an unemployed is a huge sacrifice and is valued just as much as a big donation. And I got here a £10 from Bethany, who's a school student in Leicester. So thank you, Bethany. I got £100 from Sally from the Northwest, who's a healthcare worker. And I got £50 from Mark in the Northern region, donating again from his redundancy payment. And this And Richard is a new member who joined us in Brighton, and he's donating £600. Thank you, Richard. We got a Sheffield branch has raised a total of £844. Thank you, comrades. And then I got, during the course of the rally, we got a donation of £200 from Sharon, who's from the Salford branch in the Northwest. Thank you very much. Now, the next donation I want to read out is from Paula Mitchell from the Waltham Forest branch, who's donating £100 from Ken Douglas bereavement support payment. And Ken, who was our national treasurer of the Socialist Party since 2007, has sadly passed away 5 months ago. And he has been campaigning relentlessly to improve the party finances and always appreciated the self-sacrificing representation in all the donation from the biggest to the smallest. So thank you, Paula, and Ken will always be remembered in our party. Now, we are not a party of individuals, as you can see. We are a collective strength. And on that note, I've got 2 more branches from West Midlands, who is Birmingham North is donating £955, and Coventry branch is donating £1,230. So thank you, West Midlands. Okay, another branch, again, this is a branch total that I want to read out, is from Southampton branch, which is £1,670. And just to say that this includes £200 from Maggie, who's a healthcare worker, £500 from Sue, who stood as Tusk, who's an anti-cuts candidate, who stood in the election against a right-wing candidate as well. So thank you very much, comrades in Southampton. We've done a very good job. Now we will read, like I said, I want to read more, but unfortunately I'm out of time. And at this point, normally in the rally, we would say that we would pass around the buckets, but we can't do that this year. So carry on donating, comrades. And if you are inspired by the rally, and if you're not a member yet, please join us. But if you want more discussion but still support our ideas, why not make a donation today and then have a discussion with us and join us tomorrow? But that's keep on coming, comrades. And the total I'm going to read out now is it's overwhelmed and really amazing to read out, because it shows a huge sacrifice and the confidence that in ideas that this party is built on, and the need for a revolutionary party to fight for a society without poverty, without exploitation and oppression. And we raised a total, and this includes pledges as well, but we raised a total of £43,890. It's almost twice as we set the target for. And I just want to say that out of that, we already got over 25,000 paid in. So it's fantastic. And you go up until Christmas. If you haven't already paid, then do so by the end of Christmas. And the final rally, because there's still some coming in, will be announced during the sessions tomorrow, which you can also attend and can buy the ticket if you haven't already done so. So thank you very much. And I'll just end by saying that every pound, pence that we raise today will be used to fight for socialism. Thank you.
Thank you, Isai. That was an incredible appeal. So thank you very much to everyone who has donated. If you haven't been able to make a donation yet, you still can. Head to our website, socialistparty.org.uk/donate-S2020. Every penny of every donation goes into fighting for a socialist world. Our final speaker is the General Secretary of the Socialist Party, Hannah Sell, here to give you the Socialist Party's perspective and analysis. Trapped between a growing economic and health crisis, it is clear capitalism offers only dead ends. So here to explain the way forward is Hannah Sell.
Thank you very much, Helen. Obviously, tonight has not been without technical hitches. Howard heroically spoke being held up on a small tablet to the microphone. Tragically, we lost the end of Peter's speech, but I'm sure that we can get the whole thing put up online by tomorrow morning so people can go back and see how it finished. But despite the hitches, this really excellent rally and the fantastic finance collection that ISI has just announced is a material demonstration of the strength, the cohesion and the morale of the Socialist Party. Of course, it's been a difficult year for the working class as a whole and for us in the Socialist Party as well. The right-wing trade union leaders have used this crisis as an excuse for inaction and all too often to hide behind the idea of national unity. And that has been, as you've already heard tonight, while the bosses have seen the COVID crisis as an opportunity to go on the offensive, to fire and rehire on worse terms and conditions, while 12 million adults are struggling to pay their bills and unemployment is soaring, when we're heading towards an 11% contraction in the economy in 2020, the greatest in 300 years. And when, as you've already heard from other speakers, the government is already making it clear that it is the working class that will be expected to pay for the aftermath of this crisis, starting with a public sector pay freeze. So the need for a fighting workers' movement with a socialist programme could not be clearer. And the Socialist Party is playing an important part in fighting for that. And that is why, despite the COVID epidemic and the lockdown, we have grown in strength in the course of this year, as has been shown not just by the Fighting Fund collection and tonight's rally, but the turnout and enthusiasm at the whole of the Socialism event so far this weekend. And if you haven't taken part in the workshops so far, we would urge you to do so tomorrow and on Monday. But what we've done this year is only the start. And we would say to all members of the Socialist Party listening tonight and of supporters of the CWI internationally, we need to go and redouble our efforts because our party, our international, is going to be needed in the mighty events ahead. Worldwide, we are already seeing a series of tremendous movements. Hong Kong, the Lebanon, Chile, Thailand, Belarus, Poland, Nigeria. Gigantic protest movements have shaken society. Of course, they all have different characteristics, but they also have features in common. In all of them, young people have been to the fore. They have united different sections of the working class across ethnic and racial divisions. They've shown enormous courage, like the Thai protesters this week, 55 of them in hospital, injured as a result of police attack, and who responded by 10,000 surrounding the police headquarters, heroically and somewhat bizarrely, protected only by giant inflatable rubber ducks, and paint bombing the police headquarters. The other thing that all the movements have in common is, of course, they've been fueled, driven by the economic impoverishment of the working class and of young people. And the same is true of the Black Lives Matter movement, which erupted onto the streets of the US, but also here in Britain earlier this year. Before George Floyd was murdered, he had caught COVID and he had lost his job as a result of it. Summed up in the suffering of one individual is the way that the pandemic has laid bare the class divisions in society, with black workers overwhelmingly concentrated among the poorest. And that, of course, is true in Britain as well. While the working class has suffered during the pandemic, Britain's billionaires have increased their wealth by more than a third. And the BLM movement, when it flooded onto the streets of Britain, was fueled by anger at that. It really was a pouring out of young people from every background, from the council estates and the working class communities of Britain, onto the streets of the city centres. And the Socialist Party was there alongside them. Although the BLM movement is not on the streets right now, in that sense it's subsided, it was absolutely not what Keir Starmer described it as, a moment. Because millions of working class young people facing mass unemployment, if they're at university paying £9,000 to be imprisoned in their halls of residences, they are angry and their anger is finding new expressions. An essential part of the role of our party, the Socialist Party, though, is not just to support movements, but to point towards how they can win. Mass movements will erupt in Britain again, as they have globally. But how do we ensure that they can win victories? An important element of that has to be to fight for the trade union movement to use its potential power. 6 million workers currently organised in trade unions. Not, as was the case, unfortunately, with the leadership of many of the unions, with Unison in particular, earlier this year, to leave nurses to fight alone for a 15% pay rise and to not take action in support of them, but rather, as Howard rightly pointed towards, to fight the threat of a new pay freeze with a national day of action, but to prepare the ground for coordinated strike action. We have to fight to ensure that the mistakes of the last crisis of 2010, 2011 are not repeated. On that occasion, the students were left to fight alone by the trade union leaders, but we then had a magnificent public sector strike movement, but the right-wing leaders settled for a few crumbs, effectively selling out that movement. And we have to fight instead that this time the trade unions spearhead a common struggle against this next round of austerity and defeat this weak government, which has carried out 15 U-turns already and absolutely can be defeated. Of course, a central factor, and this is a global issue, it's not just in Britain, that has limited what has been won by the different movements that have developed is in general at this stage their very limited level of organisation. The absence as yet of serious working class political organisations, mass workers' parties. But the desire for that is inherent in these movements. Let's look at young people in Britain. We had a general election last December. 62% of all young voters voted for Jeremy Corbyn. The big majority of the young BLM demonstrators had voted for a radical programme. Many were looking for an alternative to capitalism, even if they did not yet have a clear idea how to achieve it. Most had, however, drawn an important conclusion from their experience of the Corbyn era, or really more than one conclusion. First of all, that it is never enough to have a left leader if that party is packed with pro-establishment MPs and a pro-establishment machine, and that it's not enough just to have a good leader, but that mass struggle is also necessary. And of course, the BLM movement was mass struggle, but it demonstrated as well the limits of spontaneity, the fact that we do need mass democratic organisation if we are to win. Workers and young people need their own party armed with a socialist programme. Now, in the Socialist Party, we said at the start that Corbyn becoming Labour leader did not make Labour a workers' party. Those of you who are used to Socialist Party meetings will have heard this so many times you could repeat it in your sleep. But what we said was that rather it created two parties in one, that there was still a pro-capitalist, privatising, warmongering party that dominated the Parliamentary Labour Party and the machine, and a potential anti-austerity party in formation around Jeremy Corbyn. We welcomed that potential party and we campaigned at every stage for what was necessary for it to win the battle against the pro-capitalist right. And look, let's be clear, we take no pleasure whatsoever in the fact that our warnings have been proved correct, that retreat and compromise doesn't work, that the party right and behind them the capitalist class would only be satisfied with the annihilation of Corbynism, with driving it into the dirt. But unfortunately, we have to keep on warning because those lessons have not been learnt by all. I saw, for an example, an interview with Rebecca Long-Bailey, one of the Socialist campaign group of MPs who have rightly stood in solidarity with Jeremy Corbyn. But she, in that interview, suggested that he should apologise for his mistakes. Honestly, what does that mean? I'm sure Rebecca would agree that Corbyn is not and has never been anti-Semitic. In reality, while he was leader of the Labour Party, even the cross-party House of Commons Home Affairs Committee, which included a number of Blairites, was forced to conclude that anti-Semitism was no more prevalent in the Labour Party than in any other party, but that on the contrary, 3/4 of all politically motivated anti-Semitic incidents came from far-right forces. The reality is that this issue has been cynically used by the right as a battering ram. If you don't believe the Socialist Party, I would recommend that you read a book called Left Out. It's by 2 Times journalists. They are not sympathetic to the left's cause. But in it, they describe how Tom Watson talked about the issue of anti-Semitism. That he said it was a blunt instrument with which to smash Corbyn and his supporters. And he appealed for complaints on the issue to come forward so that he could expose the Corbynites publicly and tarnish them irrevocably. How much clearer could you get the reality of what was taking place? Yes, there have been mistakes, but the mistakes are not of the kind that Rebecca Long-Bailey is referring to. The mistakes that have been made is to imagine that retreating could somehow succeed in pacifying the right. And we know the policy compromises that were made with them, including adopting Starmer's programme on Brexit in the 2019 election, including acceding to councils, Labour councils, continuing to carry out cuts. That, combined with the failure to democratise the party, to restore trade union rights, to introduce mandatory cerise election, and by the way, we would add, it was a mistake of the left not to back the Socialist Party's proposal that we be allowed to affiliate. But it wasn't supported. Why? Because it would be too provocative to the Blairites, because the Socialist Party, then the militant tendency, are the black beasts of the Blairites. All those compromises were made in the hope of achieving unity. And of course, Starmer was elected, cynically playing the unity card. And under the cover of that, has been intransigent in making Labour once again, as it was under Blair, a reliable representative of capitalism, of the billionaires. And it's not just the withdrawal of the whip from Corbyn, but the Labour Party members up and down the country who are being suspended or expelled for passing motions in solidarity with him. And of course, the additional issue, which Howard rightly referred to, is the way that the Parliamentary Labour Party, the majority of them, have in reality acted as a prop to the Tory government throughout the COVID crisis. There's been much talk about the need for unity by the left in the last period. And look, unity is a positive aim. But let's be clear. First of all, it just isn't true that only united parties win elections. We just had a general election where a Tory, now Prime Minister, who had booted out 21 of his MPs just 3 months before the general election, was able to win a majority, although his party, of course, is as divided as ever. But we do understand, it's a maxim of the Labour movement, isn't it? Unity is strength. And we do want the maximum possible unity in the workers' movement. But not if it means unity with Tory-light politicians. People like Rachel Reeves, now back in the shadow cabinet, who, let's remember, famously declared that Labour would be tougher on benefits than the Tories. And she said it when the bedroom tax was being introduced. She said it when the Tories were presiding over the spreading of widespread hunger in Britain, so that now today more than 8 million people are suffering from food poverty. Tory-light politicians like them are now again in the leadership of the Labour Party, and that is a defeat. And unity with them will not take us a single step forward. So there now has to be an urgent discussion on how we can fight to solve the crisis of working class political representation. Left union leaders correctly have demanded Corbyn's reinstatement. And I've no doubt, prior to the events of this week, they hoped they had a deal and that he would be reinstated. But part of the job of socialists is to see things as they are, to face reality, and then to decide what needs to be done and do it with iron determination. And Howard was absolutely right when he said that the right are conducting a civil war against the left in the Labour Party, not just Corbyn, but his supporters at local level. And in our view, it's positive that left NEC members are fighting back, led by Howard, actually, and also that a legal battle is being fought in defence of Corbyn. But Chris Williamson won legal victories that didn't win a victory inside the Labour Party. It needs to be backed by mass action. And that's why we've raised that the left union leaders should initiate a mass conference, a council of war, to bring together all of those who want to fight for a mass workers' party. And it's vital that doesn't only include those inside Labour, but also the left unaffiliated unions, the Socialist Party and other socialist organisations. And we would add, it should be opened up to the many tens of thousands who are now flooding out of the Labour Party as individuals. And it's not just individuals. The Bakers Union, for example, is now launching a consultation on whether or not they should continue to be affiliated. And even though forward is to stay and fight, in our view, if you're serious about that fight, you want to bring the people who are outside into the fight as well. So a conference should be for all of those who want to fight for a mass workers' party with a socialist programme. And we organise a common struggle. Of course, within that, we can debate the way forward between those who would say that it's still possible to transform Labour into a workers' party and those like us in the Socialist Party who will argue, having failed to do that while Corbyn is leader, that is not the way forward now. We are not going to build a new workers' party within the constraints of Labour. Now, to be clear, whether or not the workers' movement does what is necessary, whether or not the left acts at this point, the current, not very stable, but seeming surface stability in politics is going to shatter. The Tories are in a serious crisis. Starmer is waiting in the wings, burnishing his credentials, how he would be a more reliable, a more able, at least than Johnson, representative of capitalist interests. And it's far from impossible that the crisis at the top of the Tories could lead to Starmer being drawn into government one way or another long before the next scheduled general election. Let's remember, in the Blair and Brown years, Labour lost 5 million votes as a result of its policies of warmongering and privatisation. But that was in a different world. That was in the pre-2007-2008 economic crisis world. The policies that the equivalents of the Labour Party pursued in office, acting in the interests of the capitalist class after 2007-2008, were vicious, were terrible attacks on the working class. And even more will be demanded in the future by Labour parties in power. Look what happened to PASOK in Greece. It became an ex-party in reality as a result of implementing austerity. And that could be the fate of Starmer's Labour Party if he's involved in the implementation of the misery the capitalist class are going to demand from the working class in the coming period. Just as, by the way, Biden will implement the policies of Wall Street and can become hated by workers who currently have hopes in him in the future in the US. In their disillusionment and anger, there's no question that workers will look for an alternative. And if we don't build a genuine workers' party, Farageism, Trumpism has more space to step into the background, into the vacuum. If, on the other hand, left union leaders, together with even a handful of left MPs, were to take a clear stance to build a new party with a genuinely anti-austerity programme, it could make a huge impact. I've already mentioned Greece. Let's remember, after the last crisis, Syriza went from 4.8% of the vote in 2009 to winning a general election in 2015. Of course, it then itself bowed down to demands to implement vicious austerity, showing it's not only a question of building a mass workers' party, but also fighting, and it wasn't a workers' party in any real sense, but also fighting for it to adopt a socialist programme. Now, we know There will be many forces on the left at this stage who will attempt to evade the vital tasks that we are raising. Those who were previously prominent Corbynistas, but are now, for example, suggesting the alternative is to turn towards community action, building social movements, and that somehow they hope that will exert pressure on Starmer. It's an evasion. Even in those terms of pressure on Starmer, a party to the left of him would have far more effect than their strategy. But in the absence of a fighting mass workers' party, there are also good people who were previously Corbynistas who now feel the only option available to them is to help by working in food banks, is to do charitable works effectively, to help the impoverished sections of the working class. And we say to them, we understand the impulse. But even from the point of view of helping to overcome poverty in the short term, playing a role in class struggle is far more effective than any kind of charitable works. You can give a zillion different examples, but just to give one, the Glasgow equal pay strike, in which CWI members played a leading role, resulted in £500 million extra in the pockets of the working class of Glasgow. It would take a lot of food bank work to have that kind of effect. Of course, it's vital that industrial militancy also has a political arm. And this is the other side of the question of the need for a new mass workers' party. One of the employers that have fired and rehired are Tower Hamlets Labour Council. Those workers are doing all they can to fight them industrially, but they would also be strengthened by being able to stand candidates against them at the ballot box. Similarly, if Sadiq Khan continues on his current path, which seems very likely, of instead of standing up to the Tories, presiding over attacks on the pay, jobs and conditions of London's transport workers, then an important aspect of the fight back by the RMT, Unite and other unions could be standing against him at the ballot box. Maybe there's a London left MP, Jeremy Corbyn, they might like to approach and see if he would like to stand in the London mayoral election. Now, Unite has already cut its affiliation fees before all this blew up to Labour as a means of trying to put pressure on Starmer. And I read in the Mirror that the affiliated unions are now threatening to withhold money from next May's Labour local election campaigns. But we would say that's positive. But why don't you take one step further and allow your local branches to take the decision that they can stand candidates if they want to in local elections against Labour councils where they're implementing cuts, and if they follow what the Tories want, they will be implementing cuts worse than anything we've ever seen, and a chance to combat them at the ballot box would be very effective. In the Socialist Party, we always put forward what we think is necessary, and we try to convince union leaders to follow that path. We fight to push trade unions and convince trade union members to pass motions for the policies that we think are necessary. But we also don't just sit back and wait for others to take action. We try and act as a lever to show what is possible. And that's why we proposed to the other participants in Tusk, the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition, most importantly the RMT, the Transport Workers Union, that we restart electoral activity in next May's local elections, so that even if the steps we want are not taken by other forces, Tusk can act as a banner for as many trade unionists, Black Lives Matter activists, community candidates as possible to come together and to stand in defence of local services, jobs, pay and conditions. There are different forces involved in Tusk. It's a coalition. We're united in our opposition to austerity and cuts. But of course, in the Socialist Party, we go further than that. Our view, along with growing numbers of others, is that capitalism itself means endless austerity, cuts, and environmental degradation. It doesn't work. And that is why we put forward a socialist programme, because it is the only way forward for humanity. That is why we call for the taking of the major corporations and banks out of private hands in order to harness all the science, technique, human ingenuity and talent that exists to develop a socialist planned economy. That is the only way to prevent environmental catastrophe and to meet the needs of humankind. It can't just be done from the top by a government. It requires an active movement of the working class. We would also add a socialist programme, the programme we fight for, is a very important part of raising the confidence of workers to fight back immediately, because it points to the fact you don't have to accept the logic of the capitalist system. If, for example, you're a worker in the aviation industry, you don't have to accept their arguments that there's no planes flying, there's no point in their jobs. Instead, you say, we demand nationalisation as part of the development of a socialist Green New Deal, where workers can make proposals to transfer production where necessary to green production, but with no loss of jobs, and defending the terms and conditions of all of those workers. The need for socialism is lodged in the situation, and that terrifies the capitalist class. Such is the crisis in their system that the Tory government and governments across the world have intervened in the economy on an unprecedented scale to try and limit the scale of the economic crisis. The government is paying 80% of millions of workers' wages for a year. In a sense, that goes far further than Corbyn's programme ever did. And they're doing that when the General Secretary of the TUC shamefully stood on the steps of Downing Street and accepted the pittance of the job support scheme, far less than the furlough scheme. Of course, the furlough's not enough. We want work or full pay for everyone. Nonetheless, it gives an indication of what is possible. Why should people accept homelessness when the threat of COVID showed that even this hopeless government could take measures to put a roof over everybody's head in the course of a week? Why should we accept unemployment when it's so clear that the state can play a role in planning society? Why instead shouldn't we nationalise in order to have a socialist plan of production, to share out the work so that everybody's talents are used and everyone has a decent standard of living? The capitalist class are genuinely frightened that those will be the conclusions drawn not just by us, but by many, many workers as a result of 2020. That's what the Financial Times meant when they said in an editorial that the COVID crisis could bring socialism on its coattails. We must not believe the bile, the slander, that socialist and left ideas are unpopular and irrelevant. If the capitalist class really thought that, why did they put so much energy into smashing Corbynism with his relatively moderate programme? At the moment, there's a supposedly public inquiry taking place into state spying on political organisations. It's not very public. They're doing their best to reveal absolutely nothing. And as Howard pointed out, meanwhile, the government are passing new laws to give them the right to break the law while they're spying, and only 34 Labour MPs voted against that. But even despite its limits, the revelations it's making are worth looking at. They show, of course, the abhorrent racist and sexist behaviour of the police spies. But they also show something else. 1,000 organisations were spied on and only 4 were right-wing. The inquiry is particularly looking into the SDS, one particular police spying unit that was set up in 1968 at the behest of MI5. We, by the way, were mainly spied on directly by MI5. But why did they bother? They're all absolutely clear about it because they were frightened of the left. They were frightened of socialism. The barrister for the Met Police put it most clearly. He said there was near revolution on the streets of France and we thought it could happen here. That's why they were spying on us. We in the Socialist Party have a serious programme for socialism. In the past, as the militant tendency, we were able to lead effective mass struggles that took on and defeated Thatcher. That's why they spied on us. They didn't need to spy on us to find out what we stood for. We have always shouted it as loud as our voices will enable us to. But the reasons they were frightened, in many senses, are strengthened tenfold today. Even the capitalists themselves realise their system is in crisis, that it offers no future for the next generation. And that is why we are entering a mere era of mass revolt, of revolution, of enormous struggle. And there will be opportunities in the era we're going into to build a mass force capable of leading a movement that can bring an end to capitalism and begin to build a new socialist order. If you agree, join us in that struggle.
Thanks, Hannah. And to all our rally speakers tonight, putting forward inspiring ideas and reporting on inspirational struggles. We'd also like to send a special thanks to our international guests who are taking part in Socialism 2020 weekend from all the continents around the globe. There are also speakers, we'd also like to send thanks to the speakers in the workshops, the chairs, the technical assistants, especially those who got us back up and running tonight after the glitch. They get a special round of applause. And all those who are helping throughout the weekend to make it possible. Behind the scenes, as I said, there are a hard-working team who have made the event a success so far, and they will be working hard over the next few days, so thank you to all of them. Thank you to our regional and branch organisers who have helped promote this event, selling tickets, and the team at the National Centre. Thank you to you all. And finally, thank you to all of you who have tuned in across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and YouTube. And if you haven't already, then you can still get tickets to take part in the workshops that are taking place on Sunday and Monday. Even though tonight and this weekend we've had to be physically distant, it's the ideas and a willingness to fight for socialism which draws us together. We're a programme of working class unity which is immensely powerful no matter the context. It's been a strange year, but one that is going to politically close very different from how it started. The ruthlessness of the capitalist system that puts all else secondary to the profits of the few has been revealed. Lives have been lost so the bank balances of a few can continue to grow. Here in Britain, and in many countries around the world, we have seen determined struggle burst out at every corner. There's huge anger at the misery imposed on ordinary people, and it cannot and will not simply dissipate. There will be mass movements on the horizons. Movements which we in the Socialist Party want to help build and organise. A socialist programme will be key to answer the problems of a broken capitalist system. And if you agree, you should join with us today. Usually, socialist gatherings end with the singing of the Internationale, a song which is known to be sung in over 95 different languages. It is a song about working class unity against capitalist oppression. And it's given even more meaning because of the pandemic that keeps us apart. Feel free to sing along at home, and we hope to see you soon in the future struggles of our class.
From your sun.